it was about 5-6 days ago that the Eritrean and Ethiopian National Defense Forces launched a coordinated offensive against our positions, especially in Adiabo area. It's originally a 4-pronged attack, and then it became a 5-pronged one. This was on top of what had been going on in the southern part of Tigray. As you know, the Abiy government launched an offensive on the 24th of August. And after 3 days of defending our positions, we were able to launch a counter-offensive. And we have managed to control large swathes of territory that after dislodging the enemy in northern part of Olo. And enemy forces have been making all kinds of attempts to retake the positions they had lost. They only ended up in losing thousands more of elite divisions, including Republican Guard divisions. And the campaign in the southern part alone involved the 6th Command and the 8th Command in their entirety, and mechanized divisions, support mechanized units, plus 3 divisions from the Southern Command. So we're talking about roughly about 60,000 personnel from enemy side involving in the offensive. And the fact that we have not only neutralized the offensive, but also managed to control that large swathe of land simply means that I'm not really sure the military people would come up with the details, but we're talking about 2.5 command has been taken out of action. Whether this is in terms of dead, wounded, or captured. So at least we have thousands of prisoners of war. And there have been efforts to send more troops to retake positions, but it is a hair-brained scheme, as it were, in the sense that units that have already been dislocated as a result of our counter-offensive were simply being pushed to retake positions they had already lost, and their reinforcements were not. I mean, especially the elite Republican Guard units were not much for the kind of task they were given. And Abiy's government obviously was being clever, and probably, well, it turned out clever by half, but by launching more offensives in coordination with the Eritreans, they would stop any possible loss, because they had managed to distract our attention from west to the south. Because by the time the offensive was launched, we only had limited presence there for defensive purposes, because our expectation was that most of the theater would be in the west. So by the time we were moving troops, it was obvious that our defense lines in other parts of Tigray would be more vulnerable. So we still managed to stop their advance in many parts. Now, as we speak, the Western Command is in full action around Tsellemt area. The Northwestern Command, the Eastern Command crossed the border to Eritrea and joined the Eritrean forces and attacked from Adiabo. The 7th Command attacked in the Tekeze direction, and the parts of the Northwestern Command are attacking positions, our positions western Tigray, around Barakhat, because our forces are also in parts of western Tigray. So as we speak, both Eritrean and Ethiopian forces are attacking our positions in many parts of the country. Of course, the other area they launched an offensive from was Wag. They were trying to penetrate deep into Tigray through Abergele. So to give you an idea of what's happening now, our forces were able to defend their positions effectively in Wag, and they are now launching a counter-offensive. Enemy forces are not only on the defensive and likely retreating. And although Abiy's people wouldn't let their people know of, will let the people know of such developments, the fact on the ground, and the people of Wag Hemra understand it full well, is that Abiy's forces, who only 6 days ago were bragging that they were going to take over parts of Tigray, are now on the retreat. So as we speak, most of Wag Hemra is in our hands. Not because we wanted to take over Wag Hemra, but because we've been forced to defend ourselves, and as part of our defense, significant ENDF presence in the form of Central Command, the so-called Central Command, and the two corps of the Southern Command, and of course tons of Republican Guard units and commando units, special force units, have been transported to Lalibela and have joined the fray. And of course, this is where we are now. And as we speak, there is a very intense fighting going on in Adiabo, in around Keze, and in Tsalemte area. Our forces are holding out good, and in fact, in many ways, even not only reversing the enemy offensives, but in some cases, say in the case of Tekeze and in the case of Wag, they are even launching counter-offensive. This is where we are now. To give you an update, our forces have taken defensive positions. They have taken defensive measures. They have neutralized enormous amount of enemy personnel and material captured as of 3 in the afternoon. The information I have is in many parts where our forces were defending their positions, they are already taking prisoners of war. And there is every opportunity that the number of prisoners of war would swell to the higher thousands. What we are going to feed them remains to be seen, but this is where we are. But enemy, there is no let up as far as enemy offensive is concerned. Abiy Ahmed has brought to Tigray every unit he has. So there are about 8 commands, including about 5 or 6 commando units, commando divisions. All of them are, I'm not sure if his own personal security details are left in Addis. Abiy has managed to bring every unit he had in Oromia, every unit he had in Somalia, including, of course, irregular units from Amhara. And the response from Amhara is a muted one. Obviously, they realize that we're not particularly interested in Amhara territory, that we are only trying to defend ourselves and, of course, force the government's hand to engage in bona fide negotiations and all that. And the kind of support Abiy was banking on the Amhara is not particularly forthcoming this time around, which is a good sign. That the Amharas do not want to be part of such a poorly written drama by an autocrat who has nothing but contempt for the people of Ethiopia, the Amharas included. Now, the Eritreans are involved, and you ask me about the level of the extent of their involvement. They are involved big time. they have deployed their mechanized units, infantry units, they are special force units, commando units, and everything. So what's left for Eritreans to do? Except that there is every indication that the Eritreans often use the Ethiopian soldiers as cannon fodders. Because the Eritreans love human wave tactics, except that they don't have the population pool to really engage in human wave tactics at will. They have done it several times over, but this time around it would be very difficult for them to pursue human wave tactics. So they would rather use Ethiopian National Defense Forces. There is every indication that any retreating Ethiopian National Defense Force would be shot on the back by the Eritreans. But with their active involvement, especially in Adayabo area, it's a 5-pronged attack. What the last 6 days have proved is that they cannot easily break our defense lines. We're still holding our ground, if not more. But we don't expect any let up in their campaign, because what Abiy has done is to gamble on the fate of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces and the fate of Amharas and Afar. So he is doing everything in his power to bring in all the forces he can. They have been fighting for the last 6 days. In fact, for the last 11, 12 days. And the loss they are sustaining is quite staggering. And yet, he wants to continue because he's not in the business of dying. It is nameless people, just statistics, who are in the business of getting killed. It's very unfortunate. So, Abiy and Isaias are simply gambling on the lives of tens of thousands of Ethiopians and Eritreans, so they can get even with what they consider to be an obstacle to their regional ambitions, whatever those ambitions are. So what we have here is a conflagration which has already been internationalized. And Isaias and Abiy are attacking our positions in Barakhat, and they are blaming the Sudanese. The Sudanese are nowhere to be found there. Our forces are in Tigray, within Tigray, and they are attacking those positions. And our forces, despite their modest number, I would say, are holding up very well, and in fact inflicting heavy damage on enemy. But the campaign would not stop there. We still are under pressure from every direction, pumping in troops after troops, sending cannon fodders after cannon fodders. But as far as fighting moral goes, as far as the practice goes, we believe will prevail against all odds. This is the status. But what the international community doesn't seem to understand is that it's not just Abiy trying to subdue Tigray or subjugate Tigray. It is already a regional conflagration where all Ethiopia's resources are deployed without any exception whatsoever. All so-called special force units from all the regions are being deployed. It's deja vu all over again. This happened quite some time, about 2 years ago and a year ago, and then it's happening again. The Eritreans are fully involved. Air power is involved in every direction. Mechanized units are involved in every infantry units, special force units are involved in every direction. So we're defending our positions. But the international community needs to understand that it's not a simple conflict between the TPLF or the Tigray government and Abiy Ahmed. It is a conflict that has attracted the full involvement of the Eritrean army. The Eritrean army is not making a foray into Tigray for the first time. It has been around for quite some time. In fact, it has occupied Tigray territory for well over 2 years now. So it's a bit of misunderstanding. It's a bit of a misnomer when, for example, the special representative, the special envoy of the United States government called on the Eritreans or Abiy government to disengage, to call for the disengagement of the Eritreans or the re-entry of the Eritreans into the conflict. It's not a re-entry, it is a continuation of a joint project they had initiated about 2 years ago, a project which we have every reason to believe has been genocidal through and through. So Eritreans are in this game in full. I mean, they are not playing games here. They are fully involved, and we'll see what they can do to change the facts on the ground. As you rightly pointed out, one of the prisoners of war, a division commander from the ANDF, was alluding to their joint plan that would involve the Eritreans making advances from Barahle to the east, from Rama, Zalambesa, and from Adiabo. There are indications that the Eritreans are amassing, building up troops around Rama in Zalambesa. In fact, shelling has never stopped. And if they see some weakness on our part, they would stop at nothing to launch a full-scale offensive, not only in the direction of Adiabo, but also in Rama, Zalambesa, or even Barahle. As I speak, I cannot be sure if they haven't launched any offensive here, because they are taking up offensive positions. They are maintaining offensive posture in those areas as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's part of the plan, because they have always worked in Kauts. Despite Abiy's protestations otherwise, he has often taken orders from Isaias. Some in the international community are gullible enough to believe that if it wasn't for Isaias's recalcitrant behavior, Abiy would have settled for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. I can only say that Abiy is just taking the international community for a ride. Abiy, in fact, in some of our informal confidential meetings, suggested that we coordinate our efforts to neutralize Isaias. We didn't take him seriously when his people said that. We don't take him seriously because ultimately, for them, what matters is whether they can destroy a common enemy, not just TPLF or the government of Tigray, but also anything that resembles Tigray resistance and the people of Tigray. So the international community need to call out Abiy on what he really has been doing. It's not just about being forced into such a conflict by Isaias Afwerki. Isaias, as bad as he is, obviously, as trigger happy as he is, to say that he was prodded into joining this conflict by with Abiy protesting would be overstating the case. It's not true. It's a joint project, and we have every reason to believe that unless we effectively checkmate the two forces, this will never stop, or unless the international community gets its acts together and calls their bluff on their brinkmanship. We would still continue to see a very troubled region, the Horn of Africa. To allow Isaias to destroy Tigray is essentially to allow him a free hand to destabilize the entire region, because he has been consistent to a fault in characterizing Tigray and the Tigray leadership and the people of Tigray as the only people who stood in the way of his ambitions, whatever his ambitions are. And unfortunately, Isaias' ambitions are not national ambitions. He's not in any way interested in what happens in Eritrea. as long as it's not a threat to his position. He doesn't care a hoot whether Eritreans are in a position to feed themselves or not. He cares a lot about what his role is going to be in the region. So to the extent that he has not been able to achieve his regional ambitions, he continues to blame the Tigrayan leadership, the TPLF leadership, and the people of Tigray for standing in the way of that ambition. So to, at this point in time, allow him through either the negligence or acquiescence of the international community to allow him to break Tigray resistance is to give him a carte blanche, a blank check to continue to destabilize the region. Next will be Sudan. Next will be Djibouti. He will stop at nothing. So what we are doing in Tigray at this point is not just about of relevance to us as a people, because we have to survive. Because these people are not going to, they have never minced their words about their intentions to destroy us as a people. Yes, we will fight to the nail to survive as a people. But for the international community to assume that this is just a simple conflagration would be the height of irresponsibility as far as we're concerned. Because to allow Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed to break us, and we have every confidence in our capabilities, in the Tigray Defense Force capabilities to neutralize a threat at enormous costs, of course, to allow them to get away with their regional venture is to write a check for them to destabilize the entire region. And that needs to sink in. That's why some of the call for the cessation of hostilities misses the point. We have never been against cessation of hostilities because cessation of hostilities will be in the best interest of our people. We need humanitarian access for our people. Our people need all the support the international community can, not because they cannot feed themselves, but because our enemies have imposed a very cruel, ruthless blockade on our people. And we need that. We need to break that siege, that blockade, peacefully if possible, by force if necessary. But this use of force has been imposed on us. And to call on us to cease hostilities is to bark up the wrong tree, because we have always been calling on the international community to bring its pressure to bear on Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki and to heed our calls for a peaceful settlement of this conflict. But steeped as they are in the tradition of inflicting more damage on civilians, on people, and especially in the case of Isaias Afwerki, whose sole vocation has been destabilizing the region, this is not something he is ready to countenance. But for the international community to fall for Isaias and Abiy's tricks, that would be the height of responsibilities, as I keep saying. So we in Tigray would still once again call on the international community to really calibrate its words and its measures. What we see here is not a good versus evil sort of arrangement where Abiy, the reformer, is being forced into a very bad association with Isaias because of Isaias's high-handed tactics. No. Abiy wills it, Abiy willed it, Abiy wants it, and Abiy is as much to blame, if not more to blame, for the state of affairs that we find ourselves now than Isaias Afwerki himself. But Isaias, it has always been his vocation to destabilize the region. And so the international community needs to take into account these realities. We are fighting, defending ourselves against all odds. We're fighting two of the largest militaries in Africa. And they are the ragtag militias they have brought together. In the last 11 days, we have been able to defend our positions, and in many cases, even not only defend our positions, even launching counteroffensives to neutralize enemy. And we're confident our forces and our people will ultimately come out victorious. But at what cost is going to be a function of whether the international community continues to play hide and seek with this repeat offenders that Isaias and Abiy are. You asked about Ethiopian Airlines. I mean, Ethiopian Airlines used to be the pride of Africa, the pride of Ethiopia. It's an airlines that was given the fullest possible support by the Ethiopian government under EPRDF, TPLF leadership, and it has become what it has become thanks to its management, its independent management style. Governments, successive governments, have never been allowed to play a free hand in the operations of the Ethiopian Airlines. Despite the Meles, for example, Meles or Haile Mariam's government, statist policies, Ethiopian Airlines was never interfered with when it comes to managing its own affairs. By the time Ethiopian Airlines has achieved or has reached what appears to be the pinnacle of success, at least in not only local but also regional and international standards, what Abiy Ahmed is doing is to use it as a cargo for weapons, munitions from all over the country. And Ethiopian Airlines has had flights to Azerbaijan, to Iran, to Emirates, to God knows where, wherever Abiy has managed to buy contraband weapons or munitions. And about 5 days ago, in 3 days' time, Ethiopian Airlines was able to conduct about 30-something flights to Lalibela and Samara, transporting munitions as well as elite Republican Guard units. It's very unfortunate. These elite units and the weapons they are carrying are meant to kill children, to kill women. Unfortunately for us, those forces have been effectively been dealt with, especially the ones who came from Lalibela. As we speak, we have reversed their offensive, and we are in control of most of Wag Himra. It has never been our intention to control Wag Himra, but defending our positions also means that making sure that enemy would not come and get at us again. So what Ethiopian Airlines is doing is quite a disgrace to the airlines industry. The airlines industry, I understand, lives by some values, not just profit motive. Even if we were to assume that airlines operate by profit motive, transporting troops without any payment whatsoever by a government, a very heavy-handed government, wouldn't fit that bill. Second, suspending international flights, domestic passenger flights, and using them to transport weapons. Sometimes, reconfiguring even passenger flights to fit cargos. Ethiopian Airlines, quite simply, has become an instrument of promoting a genocidal campaign against the people of Tigray. And it's not just about genocide against the people of Tigray. In the very young soldiers that are being transported and that are now becoming cannon fodders in our efforts to defend ourselves. Ethiopian Airlines, I would say, has their blood in its hands as well. So we're not going to advise the Ethiopian authorities to stop using Ethiopian Airlines because they won't. But we call on the international community to call a spade a spade. The Ethiopian Airlines is now fully involved in promoting the genocidal campaign against the people of Tigray. Shame on you, executives of the Ethiopian Airlines, who either fail to say no or who are complicit with Abiy's genocidal campaign. It's very unfortunate. This is an institution which once was dubbed the pride of Africa, and the way we see it, it is going to be a disgrace. It is already, as far as I'm concerned, a disgrace to Africa. And it's very unfortunate. Because from my readings, I understand that an airline industry, an accident to an airlines, particular airlines, would devastate that airlines, but it could be a net gain to the airlines industry because they can learn from the failure of one airlines, even if it lands in some sort of trouble. So its robustness or its fragility will depend on whether it can learn from its experience. But unfortunately, the way the Ethiopian Airlines is handling its business will not only destroy the airlines itself, but also give the airline industry a very bad name. At this age and day, to have an acclaimed, international acclaimed airlines being complicit with the destruction of children, civilians, and a genocidal campaign that is being authored by Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki would be an absolute abomination as far as we're concerned. With regard to humanitarian assistance, by the way, we didn't launch the offensive. Abiy launched the offensive. And we thought it was fortunate, sort of, that he didn't launch offensive through Afar, because that would give him excuse to stop humanitarian aid flow. And nothing has happened in the humanitarian corridor, but the moment they launched an offensive, they had already given orders for authorities to stop the trucks which had already made it past the Sorro checkpoint. And most of the trucks in that convoy have returned since to Samara or to Adama. So it was part of the design. So Abiy is not just launching an attack after attack, offensive after offensive, but also he has stopped aid altogether, and people who would otherwise have taken advantage of that aid are not taking advantage of this aid anymore. So the international community doesn't seem to say anything about this. The international community seems to be oblivious to such a dreary state of affairs, a very sad state of affairs. And it's our hope and expectation that the international community, we are working closely with the humanitarian agencies in Tigray, and we are grateful to them for their principled position in many respects, but the international community needs to put pressure. It's not us who are standing in the way of humanitarian access. It is Abiy's government who's standing in the way of humanitarian access, and the international community should put pressure on Abiy's government. Finally, Yeah, with regard to cessation of hostilities, I wouldn't be surprised if Abiy all of a sudden comes up with the whole notion of unilateral cessation of hostilities. I don't think we'll be stupid enough to take the bait here. We have to make sure that if cessation of hostilities agreement is come about, it needs to be clearly worked out. It needs to be guaranteed by people who can say yes and no to our decisions. It needs to take into account our needs. It needs to be taken seriously, not something that is based on the capricious decision of a tyrant or a sort of smart alecky move that's going to be used as an exhaust valve if the pressure mounts on its forces. So I don't want to jump the gun, honestly. We are standing our ground in many areas. We are